8-year-old Mateo Santiago convulsed again, a tiny body racked by a force too immense for his delicate frame. Rookie nurse Khadija Diallo watched, a knot tightening in her stomach, each tremor a hammer blow to her soul. She saw the subtle shift in his coloring, the barely perceptible rigidity in his jaw, signs the esteemed Dr. Evander Kohl, Grandview's director, dismissed with a wave and a pronouncement about standard progression. Beside him, Dr. Paloma Vega, head of Neurosurgery, spoke of intricate surgical plans, her brilliant mind focused on the conventional, the approved, the incredibly risky. Khadija's heart pounded. She knew, with a certainty that hummed deep in her bones, that their path was a dead end. She'd seen this before, in places Grandview's elite could barely imagine. Her quiet attempts to offer a different observation, a subtle question, were met with patronizing smiles, a gentle reminder of her place. As Mateo's shallow breaths rattled, Khadija's despair burned into quiet resolve. They might not see it, but she carried a spark of hope, a daring, unconventional truth that could save this boy. She had to. Grandview Medical Center was a temple built to prestige, a gleaming testament to marble, polished chrome, and unspoken hierarchies. In its sterile corridors, Khadija Diallo, a rookie nurse whose uniform still felt stiffly new, often felt like an echo in a grand, empty hall. Every morning, as she walked past the framed portraits of benefactors and celebrated surgeons, a quiet dread settled in her stomach. Grandview wasn't just a hospital, it was a fortress of established wisdom, impenetrable to anything that didn't arrive with a pedigree and a platinum credit card. Her station, tucked away on the pediatric neuro ICU floor, afforded her a direct, agonizing view into room 304, Mateo Santiago's room. The boy, small and fragile against the hum of sophisticated machines, was a daily reminder of the stakes. His rare vascular anomaly, a cruel tangle near his brainstem, was a ticking bomb. The latest scans, projected on the consultation room's massive screen, were a canvas of shadowed horror. Dr. Kohl, Grandview's director, gestured at them with practiced ease, his voice resonating with an authority that brooked no dissent. "We're looking at a groundbreaking approach," Kohl declared, his eyes sweeping the room, lingering on the attending surgeons, bypassing Khadija completely. A nuanced bypass, an intricate dance of microsutures. Dr. Vega's team is meticulously mapping every millimeter. Dr. Paloma Vega, head of Neurosurgery, stood beside him, slender and sharp, a formidable intellect cloaked in an aura of detached brilliance. She nodded, her gaze fixed on the complex imagery, a slight frown marring her perfect brow. "The risk is, of course, considerable," she acknowledged, her voice precise, clinical. "But it is the most advanced, universally accepted technique for this specific presentation." Khadija, standing at the periphery, felt the familiar knot of frustration tighten. She saw what they saw, the tumor, the critical location, but she also saw what they missed. The subtle, almost imperceptible pulsation patterns on the peripheral vessels, the faint, almost rhythmic tremor in Mateo's left hand when he slept, signals of a deeper instability that conventional wisdom seemed blind to. These were nuances she'd learned to read not from textbooks, but from the brutal, unforgiving canvas of field medicine, where life hung by a thread and innovation was born of sheer desperation. During rounds, as Dr. Kohl pontificated on the hospital's impeccable safety record and Dr. Vega detailed the proposed surgical trajectory, Khadija tried. "Excuse me, Dr. Vega," she began, her voice soft, almost hesitant, "I've been observing Mateo's micro-seizures. Have we considered the potential for a deeper, more diffuse capillary involvement than the primary anomaly suggests?" Dr. Vega paused, her head tilting ever so slightly, a condescending smile touching her lips. "Nurse Diallo, a commendable observation for a rookie. However, our diagnostic imaging is exhaustive. We are dealing with a focal anomaly, not a systemic vascular disease. Let's stick to what the data unequivocally shows, shall we?" Her tone, though outwardly polite, was a thinly veiled rebuke, a firm reminder of her place. Kohl chuckled, a low, dismissive sound. "Nurse Diallo, your enthusiasm is admirable. But this isn't a case for speculation. This is Grandview. We operate on facts, on established protocols, on the very pinnacle of neurosurgical science." His gaze swept over her, conveying, without a single harsh word, that her input was utterly irrelevant. Khadija's cheeks burned. The other nurses, seasoned and silent, avoided her gaze. Humiliation washed over her, a bitter tang in her mouth. She knew their pitying glances, the unspoken message, "Don't rock the boat. Don't question the gods." But the image of Mateo, small and vulnerable, flashed in her mind, eclipsing her embarrassment. Later, charting Mateo's vitals, Khadija noticed a new, unsettling pattern in his EEG. A subtle, yet unmistakable, spike in activity that the automated system flagged as minor artifact. But to Khadija, who had once patched up a general using a car battery and a pair of forceps in a dusty desert clinic, minor artifact was often the first whisper of a scream. She approached Dr. Chen, the resident assigned to Mateo, a young man already showing signs of Grandview's ingrained arrogance. "Dr. Chen, have you looked closely at Mateo's latest EEG? The 1,400 hours reading?" Chen barely glanced up from his tablet. "Relax, Diallo. Standard fluctuations. The big guys have everything under control. Focus on his hydration, all right?" He waved her off, already moving to another patient, dismissing her with a flick of his wrist. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced Khadija's quiet resolve. They were all blind. Blinded by their brilliance, by their protocols, by their towering egos. Mateo's fragile life was spiraling, and they were preparing a conventional dance, unaware of the ground crumbling beneath their feet. The subtle signs she saw, the knowledge she carried, it felt like a heavy secret, a burden of truth nobody wanted to hear. Khadija walked back to Mateo's room, her hands clenching at her sides. She couldn't let this boy become another casualty of a system too proud to listen. Her quiet desperation hardened into a steel resolve. She had to find a way. The sterile hum of Mateo's room suddenly felt like the quiet before a storm. Khadija, unable to shake the gnawing feeling that something was terribly wrong, stood vigil. Her gaze was fixed on the boy's pale face, on the subtle twitch in his left eye that no one else seemed to register, on the erratic flutter of the cardiac monitor that she suspected wasn't just standard fluctuations. A tremor of foreboding tightened her chest. Then, without warning, it struck. Mateo's body seized, not the gentle tremors they'd seen before, but a violent, full-body spasm that threatened to tear him from the bed. His eyes rolled back, a terrifying, glassy white. The monitors erupted in a cacophony of urgent beeps, the line on the EEG flattening then spiking wildly, an impossible, terrifying dance. "Code Blue. Code Blue in Santiago, room 314. Khadija's voice, usually a calm murmur, ripped through the air, charged with adrenaline and raw fear. The room exploded. A flurry of nurses, residents, and finally, the imposing figures of Dr. Kohl and Dr. Vega burst in. Dr. Kohl's face, usually composed, was etched with a flicker of alarm. Dr. Vega, typically unflappable, barked orders, her voice sharp with uncharacteristic urgency. "Get the crash cart. Push midazolam, now. Check airway." Vega commanded, her hands already flying, assessing Mateo's constricted breathing. Kohl, standing a step back, observed with a clinical, almost detached severity, but Khadija could see the subtle clenching of his jaw, the flicker of panic in his usually cold eyes. Khadija, though sidelined by the specialists, watched with an almost surgical focus. She saw the standard interventions being deployed, the practiced motions of brilliant minds fighting a losing battle. But she also saw the fatal flaw, glaringly obvious to her trained eye, yet invisible to them. The seizure wasn't merely aggressive, it was obstructive. The swelling around the anomaly was compressing the brainstem more severely than they realized, creating a dangerous feedback loop. The medications they were pushing, designed to suppress the electrical storm, were exacerbating the pressure, making Mateo's fragile brain a ticking time bomb. "Dr. Vega." Khadija interjected, her voice cutting through the escalating chaos, "It's the pressure. We need to address the focal compression, not just suppress the general activity. The midazolam it's actually making it worse." Vega, wrestling with an airway, barely glanced up. Her brow furrowed with annoyance. "Nurse Diallo, stand back. You're hindering. This is standard protocol for refractory seizures. We're working. Her tone was dismissive, absolute. Kohl, meanwhile, looked at Khadija as if she were a piece of furniture that had suddenly spoken. Miss Diallo, unless you have a medical degree from a reputable institution, I suggest you allow the professionals to manage this situation. His voice was cold, razor-sharp. Tears pricked Khadija's eyes, not for herself, but for Mateo. They were losing him. She could see it in the monitors, in the faint, fluttering pulse under Vega's frantic fingers. The boy's tiny body convulsed, his breath growing more shallow, more ragged. The terror was palpable, a suffocating shroud descending over the room. The doctors, for all their brilliance, were trapped in their conventional wisdom, unable to see beyond the established playbook. Mateo's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Santiago, had been ushered out, but Khadija could hear Mrs. Santiago's muffled sobs through the closed door. Desperation, cold and sharp, seized Khadija. They had seconds, maybe minutes. If she didn't act, Mateo would die, a victim of a system too proud to listen. She took a deep, shuddering breath. This was insubordination, career suicide, but the image of Mateo's innocent face, the faint hope in his parents' eyes, spurred her on. As Kohl and Vega argued over a new dosage of anticonvulsants, their backs momentarily turned to the door, Khadija slipped out. She found Mateo's parents huddled together, their faces streaked with tears, their eyes wide with unspeakable fear. Mrs. Santiago looked up, her gaze raw with despair. "Nurse, what's happening?" Mr. Santiago whispered, his voice trembling. Khadija knelt before them, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She kept her voice low, urgent, yet reassuring. "Mr. and Mrs. Santiago, your son is in critical condition. The doctors are doing everything they can with conventional methods, but I believe I have an alternative perspective. A highly specialized technique for this specific type of vascular anomaly, one I've seen used effectively in very challenging circumstances. It's minimally invasive, designed to relieve that exact focal pressure causing these severe seizures." Mrs. Santiago's tear-filled eyes widened, a flicker of something, disbelief, then a fragile, desperate hope, igniting within them. An alternative? But, the doctor said there's nothing else. It's unconventional, Khadija admitted, meeting their gaze directly, and it's a risk. But I believe it's the only way to save him. The current path, I'm afraid, is not working. He's crashing. The raw honesty in her voice, the quiet authority she exuded despite her rookie status, cut through their grief. Mr. Santiago's face crumpled. "Tell us. What is it? Please. If there's any hope at all." He reached for his wife's hand, clinging to it as if for dear life. Khadija knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that she had just offered them a lifeline, a radical, dangerous hope she wasn't sure the hospital would ever allow. But for Mateo, she had to try. Khadija's quiet courage, often overlooked, mirrors a feeling many of us know too well. If you resonate with stories where the underestimated rise and make a profound difference, then you're already part of our community at heart. We invite you to make it official. Please consider hitting that subscribe button and joining our global family of story lovers. Your support is incredibly important. It helps us continue crafting and sharing more inspiring, high-quality narratives just like Khadija's. Thank you for being here, and for helping us grow. The silence in the waiting room after Khadija's hushed confession stretched taut, broken only by the ragged breaths of Mateo's parents. Mr. Santiago, usually composed, now looked like a man adrift, his eyes pleading, "What do we do?" Khadija felt the full weight of her decision. She had broken protocol, risked her career, but looking at their faces, she knew she'd done what was right. "You have to demand it," she said, her voice a low, steady current in the swirling chaos. "You have to insist they let me try." The next few hours were a blur of raw emotion. Mateo's parents, armed with Khadija's quiet conviction, stormed back into the ICU, confronting a bewildered Dr. Kohl and a frost-faced Dr. Vega. Their grief had hardened into resolve. "Our son is dying," Mrs. Santiago declared, her voice trembling but firm. And you are letting him die. Nurse Diallo offered hope. A different way. We want her to perform the procedure. Dr. Kohl's face went crimson. Mrs. Santiago, with all due respect, Nurse Diallo is a rookie. Her ideas are unvetted, dangerous. She has, in fact, been dismissed for gross insubordination. Dismissed for offering to save our child? Mr. Santiago countered, stepping forward, his voice a low growl. For offering an option you refuse to even consider? We will not stand by while our son perishes because of your arrogance. If anything happens to Mateo because you refuse to allow every possible intervention, we will hold Grandview Medical Center accountable. Every newspaper, every news channel will know how you denied a desperate family their only hope. The word PR disaster hung in the air, a venomous cloud. Kohl, a man who lived and breathed reputation, blanched. He glanced at Dr. Vega, who, for once, had no immediate, protocol-bound retort. The thought of Mateo's parents going public, their story of a dismissed nurse with a potential cure, while Grandview's elite doctors stood by, was a horrifying prospect. The hospital's image, his own career, would be in tatters. He was cornered. With a barely concealed sneer, Kohl stalked out, pulling out his phone. Khadija was miles away, trying to numb the ache of being fired with the sterile comfort of her small apartment. Her phone buzzed, displaying an unknown number. Hesitantly, she answered. Diallo, Dr. Kohl's voice snapped, laced with barely contained fury. You're to return to Grandview immediately. The Santiagos are insisting on your unconventional intervention. He practically spat the last word. Consider this a temporary reinstatement. If this fails, if anything goes wrong, your career is finished, and you'll face the full consequences of every single broken protocol. Do you understand? A cold dread seeped into Khadija's bones, momentarily eclipsing the fragile flicker of hope. He wasn't offering an olive branch, he was offering a noose. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm, a drumbeat of fear and adrenaline. The humiliation, the hostility, the crushing pressure, it all flooded back. But then she pictured Mateo's pale, seizing face, his parents' tear-filled eyes, and a different current took over. It wasn't about her career anymore. It was about Mateo. This was his last chance. And she was his last hope. A quiet resolve settled over her, firming her spine. The fear was still there, a knot in her stomach, but it was now overshadowed by a fierce, protective determination. I understand, Dr. Kohl, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. I'm on my way. The drive back felt surreal. The city lights blurred into a tunnel, her focus narrowing to a single point, Mateo. She walked back into Grandview, not as a defiant rookie, but as a warrior stepping onto a battlefield. The air in the ICU was thick with palpable tension. Dr. Kohl stood glowering. Dr. Vega watched with a blend of professional skepticism and thinly veiled contempt. But when Khadija met the tear-streaked eyes of Mateo's parents, she saw only desperate gratitude and a quiet, profound trust that filled her with an unexpected surge of courage. I need a full neurosurgical suite, specific instruments, and the best imaging tech on standby, Khadija stated, her voice projecting an authority that surprised even herself. And I need full, unobstructed access to Mateo. No interruptions. Kohl wanted to argue, to assert his dominance, but the look in Khadija's eyes, calm yet resolute, stopped him. He nodded curtly, waving a hand towards the preparing team. Dr. Vega, arms crossed, watched Khadija move with an almost clinical detachment, as if witnessing a scientific anomaly. As Khadija donned her scrubs, the familiar scent of antiseptic filled her lungs, grounding her. Her hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly, a testament to the magnitude of the task ahead. This wasn't a remote field hospital, with makeshift equipment and anonymous patients. This was Grandview, with its glittering reputation, its unforgiving scrutiny, and Mateo, a boy whose life now rested entirely in her hands. The transformation was complete. The overlooked rookie was gone, replaced by a nurse, a healer, driven by an unwavering conviction, ready to face down an entire institution for one small, fading life. She took a deep breath, pushing aside every doubt, every fear, and stepped into the operating room. The sterile air of operating room 7 hummed with unspoken judgment. Dr. Kohl stood by the observation window, his face a mask of barely concealed disdain. Dr. Vega, closer, positioned herself like a hawk, ready to pounce on the slightest misstep. Around them, the scrub nurses and anesthesiologists moved with practiced efficiency, their faces betraying a mix of curiosity and quiet apprehension. All eyes, in some way, were on Khadija. Khadija, however, was no longer aware of them. The world had shrunk to the illuminated surgical field, a delicate landscape of vessels and neural tissue projected onto the large monitors. Her hands, clad in thin surgical gloves, moved with an almost ethereal grace, selecting instruments from the tray without a glance. The usual robust neurosurgical tools were absent, replaced by a bespoke collection of microcatheters and slender, almost impossibly fine wires, tools Khadija had designed and honed in field hospitals, far from Grandview's gleaming halls. Her first move was deceptively simple, a smaller incision than any neurosurgeon in Grandview would ever consider for a vascular anomaly so deep-seated. A collective, almost imperceptible gasp rippled through the room. Vega's brow furrowed, her lips pressing into a thin line. Kohl shifted, a low murmur of disapproval escaping him. "Amateur," he mouthed, loud enough for only a few to hear. But Khadija didn't falter. Her breathing was even, her movements economical, each a deliberate stroke of art. She worked with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced far worse conditions, far greater stakes, with far less. Her eyes, usually so soft, were now pools of intense concentration, reflecting the pulsing image on the screen. She began to navigate the complex vascular labyrinth. Instead of the conventional, more invasive dissection, Khadija threaded a microcatheter, finer than a human hair, through an existing vessel, a route no one else had considered. It was like charting an unseen river, using flow and pressure to guide her, rather than brute force mapping. On the main monitor, the miniature probe advanced with painstaking precision, a tiny beacon illuminating the precarious path towards Mateo's brainstem. Dr. Vega, initially poised to dissect Khadija's technique, found herself leaning in, her critical gaze morphing into something akin to reluctant fascination. The elegance of the approach was undeniable. It wasn't just unorthodox, it was beautiful. Each subtle twist of Khadija's wrist, each minute adjustment, spoke of an intimate understanding of vascular mechanics that went beyond textbook knowledge. Then came the first tremor of doubt from the peanut gallery. "She's nearing the cerebellar peduncle," a junior resident whispered, his voice taut. One slip, and he didn't need to finish. The implications were catastrophic. Kohl stiffened, a predatory glint returning to his eyes. He waited, almost willing a mistake to happen. But Khadija merely adjusted her posture, her head cocked slightly, as if listening to an unheard frequency. With a minuscule rotation, she nudged the catheter past the critical juncture, the image on the screen showing a clean bypass of the most dangerous point. The air in the oar, which had grown thick with dread, subtly released. Vega's mouth opened slightly. She had seen countless masterful surgeries, but never anything quite like this. It was less surgery and more an intricate, high-stakes ballet. Khadija wasn't fighting the body, she was coaxing it, negotiating with its intricate design. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The only sounds were the soft beeps of monitors, the quiet rhythmic whoosh of the ventilator, and the almost inaudible clicks of Khadija's instruments. She reached the anomaly, a snarled knot of vessels. This was the moment of truth. With a final, delicate maneuver, she deployed a tiny, self-expanding coil, not the typical bulky embolization device, but a custom-fabricated microfilament that gently coaxed the blood flow away from the malformation, redirecting it to healthier pathways, all without a single invasive cut to the brain tissue itself. A collective sigh of relief, unbidden and involuntary, escaped the medical team. On the monitor, the furious, erratic pulsing of the anomaly began to calm, its chaotic energy steadily diminishing. Mateo's vital signs, which had been teetering on a knife's edge, began to stabilize. The sharp, erratic peaks on the EEG softened, indicating the easing of the dangerous pressure. Kohl stared, his meticulously composed facade finally cracking. His jaw sagged, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and dawning horror. This wasn't just working, it was working flawlessly. The rookie he had dismissed, the nurse he had fired, was performing a miracle. Dr. Vega, meanwhile, had forgotten her condescension entirely. Her eyes, fixed on Khadija, were now filled with a profound, unadulterated awe. She was witnessing something truly revolutionary, something that would rewrite textbooks, and it was being done by a humble nurse from a place unknown. Khadija, her focus unwavering, continued her meticulous work, bringing Mateo back from the precipice, one precise movement at a time. The hum of the oar was now a symphony of healing, a testament to her quiet, undeniable power. Khadija continued her work, her movements a mesmerizing ballet of precision and intent. Each delicate adjustment, each microscopic advance of her specialized instruments, was a testament to a deep, intuitive understanding of the fragile human architecture before her. The monitors, once a source of dread, now sang a quiet, rhythmic tune of progress. Mateo's heart rate found a steady cadence, his blood pressure settled into a healthy range, and the erratic storm on the EEG display slowly, steadily, subsided into a calmer, more regular pattern. The aggressive vascular anomaly, once a ticking time bomb, was now being expertly neutralized, piece by painstaking piece. The operating room, minutes ago a crucible of fear and resentment, had transformed into a chapel of hushed reverence. The surgical team, initially riddled with skepticism and anxiety, now watched Khadija with a raw, almost spiritual wonder. They weren't just observing a procedure, they were witnessing an act of pure, unadulterated genius unfold before their eyes. Scrub nurses leaned forward imperceptibly, their gazes glued to Khadija's focused profile. The anesthesiologist, a man usually stoic and detached, had allowed a single, glistening tear to track a path down his cheek. Dr. Kohl remained frozen, his earlier bluster utterly evaporated, replaced by a profound, almost incapacitating sense of shame and disbelief. The miracle worker wasn't a world-renowned neurosurgeon flown in from some prestigious institution, it was the rookie nurse he'd ridiculed, the quiet woman he'd fired with such arrogant conviction. His carefully constructed world of hierarchy and protocol was crumbling around him, replaced by the irrefutable evidence of Khadija's unassuming brilliance. Dr. Vega, however, was experiencing a different kind of revolution. Her awe had deepened into something akin to professional epiphany. She saw not just a successful technique, but an entirely new paradigm for neurovascular intervention. Every twitch of Khadija's hand, every minute angle of her specialized instruments, spoke volumes. Vega, a titan in her field, felt herself humbled, brought to her knees by a knowledge she hadn't even conceived. She had prided herself on her rigidity, her adherence to established methods, yet here was a method so revolutionary, so elegant in its simplicity and effectiveness, that it redefined everything she thought she knew. Her breathing was shallow, her heart thrumming not with fear, but with an exhilarating understanding. Finally, after what felt like an eternity suspended between life and death, Khadija made one last, decisive movement. Her instruments retracted with a soft, almost inaudible click. She straightened slowly, her shoulders slumping slightly with the immense release of concentration, her eyes, though weary, alight with a deep, quiet satisfaction. She looked at the monitors one last time, a faint, almost imperceptible nod of confirmation. The vascular anomaly was repaired. Mateo was out of immediate danger. A collective sigh, soft and profound, rippled through the operating room. It was the sound of 1,000 held breaths finally released. The tension, which had been a palpable entity in the room, dissolved like mist in the sun. Nurses wept openly, silently wiping tears with the backs of their gloved hands. The weight of fear and despair lifted, replaced by an intoxicating current of triumph and relief. Dr. Vega was the first to move. She took a step closer to Khadija, her voice thick with emotion, utterly devoid of its usual condescension. "Khadija," she breathed, you did it. It's flawless. You saved him." Her eyes, usually so sharp and analytical, were now brimming with unshed tears of a different kind, admiration, gratitude, and a professional humility she had never before known. Kohl, still somewhat paralyzed, finally managed to force words past his constricted throat. His voice was a raw whisper, barely audible above the soft hum of the machines. Nurse Diallo. I was wrong. Terribly wrong. This is extraordinary. The admission, torn from him by the sheer weight of what he had witnessed, was the most profound validation Khadija could have received. It was a complete surrender of his ego, a public dismantling of his arrogant judgment. Khadija offered a small, tired smile, a glimmer of the immense personal catharsis she felt. She had fought not just for Mateo's life, but for her own truth, for the validation of her unconventional path. And in this sterile room, amidst the quiet miracle, she had found it. The silent communion of shared hope and relief filled the space, a palpable warmth in the aftermath of such high stakes. But just as the first fragile waves of celebration began to ripple through the room, a new sound began to permeate the sterile silence. A distant thrum, rhythmic and powerful, growing steadily louder. It was the unmistakable, deep-throated roar of rotor blades, approaching rapidly. The sound vibrated through the very structure of the hospital, an insistent, urgent clamor that shattered the fragile peace. Then, through the large observation window of the OR, a shadow fell. A dark, imposing silhouette against the afternoon sky. An FBI helicopter. It wasn't just landing, it was descending directly onto the hospital's helipad. The roar intensified, shaking the floor beneath their feet, signaling that the quiet triumph they had just experienced was about to be profoundly complicated. The thrum of the rotors finally subsided, leaving an echoing silence in its wake, more profound than any quiet that had preceded it. The OR was a tableau of disbelief. Dr. Kohl, his earlier smugness evaporated by the sight of the stabilizing monitors, now looked like a man whose world had just tilted on its axis. Dr. Vega, her brow furrowed in a mixture of professional awe at Khadija's skill and professional pique at the unconventional circumstances, watched the door with a guarded intensity. Mateo's parents, clutching each other, their faces etched with the lingering terror of what might have been, now wore expressions of bewildered hope. Then, the doors burst open. Not with doctors or nurses, but with a brisk, purposeful entry of two individuals in dark suits, their movements sharp and efficient. Leading them was a woman of formidable presence, her eyes sweeping the room, taking in the relieved medical team, the anxious parents, and finally, settling with an unnerving precision on Khadija. Nurse Khadija Diallo? Agent Ramirez's voice, crisp and authoritative, cut through the tension. It wasn't a question so much as a confirmation. Khadija, still holding a fine instrument, her gaze flickered from the agent to Mateo, then to the stunned faces of her colleagues. A faint flush touched her cheeks, a subtle tremor in her otherwise steady hands, the only outward sign of the turmoil within. She had known this day might come, but the suddenness of it, here, now, in this moment of fragile triumph, was disorienting. She merely nodded, her voice momentarily lost. Ramirez stepped forward, her eyes never leaving Khadija. Agent Sofia Ramirez, FBI. My apologies for the dramatic entrance, but we've been trying to locate you for some time, Nurse Diallo. She paused, then addressed the room, her voice gaining a compelling weight. And to clarify some misunderstandings regarding Nurse Diallo's qualifications. Dr. Kohl, recovering his voice, puffed out his chest. Misunderstandings? Agent, this is Grandview Medical Center. While we appreciate your presence, this is a highly sensitive medical environment. Ramirez's gaze shifted to Kohl, a subtle, almost imperceptible softening in her eyes, before hardening again. Indeed, Doctor. And it is because of highly sensitive medical environments that we are here. Nurse Diallo's field experience, as it was vaguely noted on her application, involved highly classified Black Ops medical assignments. In environments where conventional medicine was not just unavailable, but often impossible. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Kohl's face, which had been regaining its color, drained to an ashen gray. Vega, however, leaned forward, a flicker of profound curiosity and dawning respect replacing her usual condescension. Mateo's parents looked at Khadija with a new, almost reverent awe, realizing the quiet depth of the woman who had saved their son. She wasn't just performing minimally invasive vascular repairs, Ramirez continued, her voice painting a vivid picture. She was developing them, adapting them, often without sterile conditions, under duress, in crisis zones. In places where the supply chain was non-existent, and every second mattered more than any protocol. Her unique technique, which I understand saved this young boy's life, was honed in situations most doctors couldn't even imagine. She single-handedly innovated procedures that saved countless lives, under the direct purview of intelligence agencies. The weight of her words settled heavily in the room. Dr. Kohl stared, his carefully constructed world of hierarchy and protocol crumbling around him. His arrogant dismissal of Khadija, his firing her, now seemed not just unprofessional, but laughably, tragically ignorant. He swallowed hard, his gaze darting from the composed agent to Khadija, who stood quietly, her posture still humble, almost apologetic for the spectacle. Dr. Vega, initially resistant, found herself entirely engrossed. She was a woman of science, of data, and the data of Khadija's past, as presented by Agent Ramirez, was irrefutable. The rigidity of her own convictions about proper medical training began to give way to a profound, unsettling admiration. She saw not just a nurse, but an innovator, a survivor, a genius forged in the crucible of extreme necessity. The thought that she had dismissed such a mind made her professional pride ache with a bitter humility. Khadija, meanwhile, remained steadfastly focused on Mateo. The true validation, for her, wasn't the FBI agent's grand pronouncement, but the steady beep of the heart monitor, the slight rise and fall of Mateo's chest. The knowledge that she had given him a chance. She felt the eyes of everyone in the room upon her, the awe, the respect, the shock, but her own emotional landscape remained centered. She had simply done what she knew was right, what she was trained to do, what she was made to do. The accolades, the revelations, they were just noise around the quiet miracle she had helped orchestrate. Ramirez finally stepped closer to Khadija, a rare, acknowledging nod passing between them. Nurse Diallo, your service was exemplary, and we're deeply grateful for your discretion and continued commitment to saving lives, wherever you are. Even when it means breaking a few rules. There was a subtle emphasis on the last word, clearly directed at Kohl, whose face had now gone utterly slack. The quiet, underestimated nurse was no longer just a rookie, she was a legend, and everyone in Grandview Medical Center knew it. The whirring of the FBI helicopter faded into the distance, but its echoes reverberated through every stone of Grandview Medical Center. The silence left in its wake was thick with unspoken questions, shattered perceptions, and the chilling reality of consequences. Dr. Evander Kohl, still pale and visibly shaken, was ushered out of the OR by Agent Ramirez's stern-faced colleagues. The internal investigation began before he even left the floor, a relentless interrogation that stripped away his carefully constructed facade of authority. Within 48 hours, the hospital board, reeling from the FBI's implications of a deeply misguided attempt to suppress vital medical knowledge and the potential lawsuit from Mateo's parents, had made their decision. Kohl's resignation was announced as a mutually agreed-upon departure to pursue other opportunities. The euphemism was paper-thin. His career, built on arrogance and self-preservation, had crumbled under the weight of a rookie nurse's quiet courage. He left Grandview a broken man, his name synonymous not with prestige, but with a monumental professional failure. His fall served as a stark, public reminder that reputation, unbacked by substance and humility, was fragile indeed. Dr. Paloma Vega's journey was far more complex, a testament to the difficult path of genuine growth. Initially, the shock of Khadija's true identity had solidified her usual rigidity into a cold, defensive shell. She processed the news in surgical silence, replaying every condescending word, every dismissive glance she had ever thrown Khadija's way. The brilliance that had once fueled her arrogance now shone a harsh light on her own limitations. She watched Khadija during Mateo's recovery, observing the nurse's gentle yet precise aftercare, the quiet confidence that radiated from her. Vega saw not just a skilled practitioner, but a woman who possessed a depth of experience she, with all her specialized training, could not replicate. One quiet afternoon, Vega found Khadija meticulously adjusting Mateo's foredrip, the boy now awake and surprisingly energetic, already asking for his tablet. Vega approached, her usual imperious stride replaced by an almost hesitant pace. Nurse Diallo, she began, her voice unusually soft. I want to apologize. My judgment was clouded by my own biases. Your technique, your composure, it was truly remarkable. I realize now how much I underestimated you. How much I dismissed. It was a profound admission, one that cost her dearly, yet liberated her. She extended an offer, one that stunned the entire neurosurgery department. I'd like to understand. To learn. Perhaps, if you're willing, you could consult with my team on similar cases? We could establish a new protocol, integrating your expertise. It was a bridge offered, not out of weakness, but a newfound strength born from humility and a genuine desire for better patient outcomes. Mateo Santiago, meanwhile, became the living embodiment of the miracle. His seizures ceased entirely, his brain, once ravaged by the aggressive anomaly, began to heal with astonishing speed. Within weeks, he was discharged, a joyful, energetic boy ready to reclaim his childhood. His parents, their faces etched with relief and a profound gratitude, became Khadija's staunchest advocates, forever reminding the hospital of the quiet nurse who had dared to challenge the status quo for their son. Khadija Diallo returned to Grandview, not as a rookie nurse, but as the newly appointed Director of Innovative Surgical Procedures and Emergency Interventions. It was a role tailor-made for her, created specifically to harness her unique skill set and vision. She established a small, specialized unit, training a select group of nurses and even consulting with Dr. Vega's team, slowly but surely embedding her groundbreaking, minimally invasive techniques into the hospital's rigid structure. Her office was modest, just like her, but her influence was seismic. Grandview Medical Center, once a bastion of rigid hierarchy and insular pride, began a slow, deliberate transformation. The Khadija Diallo incident became a whispered legend, a cautionary tale for those who clung to old ways, and an inspiring beacon for those who dared to dream of a more compassionate, more effective future. The hospital started to prioritize talent over title, innovation over tradition, and most importantly, listening over dismissing. Khadija, however, remained Khadija. Her smile was still soft, her eyes still held that knowing depth, and her movements were still imbued with a quiet efficiency. The external validation had not changed her core, only unburdened her, allowing her authentic self to shine without fear of judgment. She moved through the revitalized hallways of Grandview, a quiet force of nature. Her story became a testament to the fact that true heroism often wears no cape, demands no spotlight, but blossoms in the quiet conviction of an individual who chooses to do what is right, even when it means challenging the very foundations of power. And in the hushed corridors, where once only the whispers of status had echoed, now there was a growing hum of hope, innovation, and a profound respect for the quiet strength that could truly change the world, one life at a time. Khadija's inspiring journey reminds us that true heroism often wears no cape, but blossoms from quiet conviction and unwavering strength, challenging rigid systems to create lasting change. What moments have you witnessed where an overlooked voice brought profound impact? Share your thoughts below. If Khadija's story resonated with you, please consider joining our growing global community by hitting that subscribe button. Your incredible support empowers us to continue crafting more meaningful and empowering stories like this. Thank you so warmly for watching, for being part of our journey, and for valuing the power of unheard truths.